This episode of Smart Poker Study is brought to you by my hand-reading webinar tomorrow, Saturday, October 22nd at 10 a.m. Accurate hand reading allows you to make better, more positive EV choices in every hand you play. Not only is it great at the tables, but hand reading allows for better, off-the-felt hand analysis. The webinar comes with additional items and some bonuses, so don't miss out. Attend the webinar and become a rock star hand reader. Visit www.smartpokerstudy.com/handreadingwebinar for more info and to purchase now. Hello, I'm Sky Matsuhashi, founder of SmartPokerStudy.com, the place for poker players who are always striving to be better today than they were yesterday. Poker people, make sure you do not skip episode 101, where I interviewed Brad Wilson of EnhanceYourEdge.com. He's a poker pro and coach, and founder of the interactive group training called I Think Tank. Hey, poker people, you're the reason for all of this. I started the whole Smart Poker Study thing as a way to teach what I know so that I can better ingrain the skills into my own game. But it's really grown to be so much more. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you very much for the awesome support through comments and emails that I receive, for supporting through Patreon. Thank you for subscribing to the podcast, to the Weekly Boost newsletter, and of course for telling your friends. You keep it up, and I'll keep on keeping on. Alrighty, now on to the final blind stealing episode. So, just to recap really quick, in class number 1, we discussed how blind stealing can improve your overall win rate, how to have a blind stealing mindset, and which players to target. I also got into some break-even math and gave you a great way to study your steal spots and opportunities. In class number 2, I gave you all the stats within my own steal pop-up in PokerTracker 4, and in the Weekly Boost video that week, I showed you exactly how to copy my pop-up for your own use. And in class 3 last week, we got into some positional analysis and why your steals need to be kept to the cutoff button and small blind. We discussed your stealing ranges and how to think about deviating from them. I also covered, why bigger bet sizing is better with stealing. And finally, I discussed how you should think about stealing with limpers already in the pot, along with some opponent stats that will help you in dealing with these limpers. And now for class number 4 this week. So you've been stealing a whole lot more because you're learning about blind stealing, learning when and where and what opponents to do it against. So your blind stealing should be upped a little bit by now. And this leads to some consequences we haven't discussed yet. But you can turn these consequences into benefits if you just have a plan and look out for a few things first. So we'll discuss 3 different consequences today of the increased blind stealing. So consequence number 1 is facing more 3-bets. So of course, it's going to happen, and today I'll show you how to look out for this and what you can do to prevent it, as well as how to capitalize on it. Consequence number 2 is that you'll be seeing more flops with weaker ranges. But here's the good thing. You can plan for how to deal with this pre-flop before you even make that raise, to steal. And consequence number 3, you'll be seen by many as a donk lag. This really can be used as a weapon versus those unbelieving opponents, and I'll show you how. I'll also get into why you may want to change tables if your aggressive opponents don't let you steal as often as you'd like to, or if they try to steal too damn much from you. Make sure you hit the show notes page for everything I discussed today, along with screenshots and links at www.smartpokerstudy.com/pod102. While you're there, you can sign up for the Weekly Boost to get exclusive poker strategy directly to that inbox. Alrighty, let's get to it. Gambate!
And now for our feature presentation.
Okay, so the 3 consequences of increased stealing. So you've been learning from this MED, and you've been stealing a whole lot more. I assume, I presume, I hope so. And good on you for that, But you've encountered probably some issues, some consequences due to your increased stealing. Your opponents are 3-betting you more. Yikes! They're calling more often, so you see flops with weaker ranges. Oh darn! And they think you're a lag donk, and your bluffs don't work as much anymore. No! Well, these all sound like pretty bad consequences, but no fear. There are ways that you can swing these to your advantage, or ways that you can find to avoid them. So consequence number 1 is facing more Resteals, facing a lot more of those 3-bets. So your opponents will start to 3-bet you a whole lot more as your stealing frequency goes up. And how do you know if the 3-bet you're facing is a likely Resteal? Well, you'll want to use the 3-bet steal stat in your HUD or in your steal pop-up like I went over in that prior episode number 2, or class number 2. This is the percentage of the time that a player 3-bet when faced by an open raise from the cutoff, the button, or the small blind. And you need to look at the stat by position. As a whole, it's decent, but by position gives you so much more information. Sometimes you'll see a player's 3-bet steal very low in the big blind, like maybe 3%, and high in the small blind, like 10%. These opponents like to Resteal in the small blind because, making that 3-bet looks really strong, but they like to call in the big blind because they've already got one big blind in, and calling 1.5 or 2 big blinds is pretty cheap, so they like to see flops that way. And let's say that you're involved in a hand, and you've determined that you're facing a Resteal, most likely a Resteal. You've got 3 choices, as I've discussed many times before. You can fold, you can call, or you can raise. Now, folding, this could be a valid choice, but you probably shouldn't have stolen in the first place. If you've determined that it's a 3-bet Resteal you're facing, you should have seen the likelihood of this happening before you even hit that open raise button, before you even tried to steal. Stealing with intent to fold to an expected 3-bet is not a good play. You're just burning the 3 big blinds that you put out there, and any equity that you might have in the hand by folding preflop and not even seeing the flop. So the other choice that you have is calling, and this is a valid choice, especially if you're in position. But your call does cap your range to hands that are not worthy of 4-betting, so you just have to be careful of that. And calling is especially tough in the small blind as your range is capped and you're giving a positional advantage to your opponent. And more on that later on the whole positional advantage thing. And the last choice that you have when you're faced with a 3-bet Resteal is, of course, you can raise. And this could be a good play because you expected the 3-bet Resteal and he obliged with one. Maybe you have a value hand or a 4-bet Restealing hand. Either way, if you knew the Resteal was coming and have a 4-bet plan, that's great. So those are the 3 choices when faced with a Resteal. You can fold, call, or raise. If you don't like any of these choices because they pain you, they hurt you deep inside that you have to make a decision versus that 3-bet now, then you probably shouldn't have stolen in the first place. Make a plan before you click that raise button for what you'll do should you get 3-bet. If you're about to raise and you think, well, I don't want to fold. If I get 3-bet, I don't want to call. And if I get 3-bet, I don't want to raise, then just don't make the steal at all. So before we move on to the second consequence of increased stealing, let's look at calling Resteals a little bit more closely. So when it comes to calling 3-bet Resteals, position really does rock. It's the most important thing. Having position will make the opponent's post-flop decisions so much more difficult. And when you call with a strong hand that can extract lots of value in position, then this is a bread and butter situation. Having position helps you deal with his C-bets more easily. You can take the pot when he checks it to you. Maybe you can call the flop, then bet when he checks the turn to you. You can raise the C-bet as a bluff or for value to look bluffy when you flop something super strong. So the key here, you want to have position in 3-bet pots. It also helps to have a good idea that he's 3-bet Restealing. You want to look at his 3-bet stat and his 3-bet steal stat to gauge how often he does this. You should be much more inclined to call when in position versus a wide 3-bet Restealer. And if you're out of position and versus guys who almost never 3-bet Resteal, then you're almost certainly better off just folding to that 3-bet Resteal. Also, when you make the call, it should be because it's more positive EV than just folding or 4-betting. This means that your call should expect to net you more money in the long run than folding or 4-betting does. With every decision made, you should be seeking the most positive EV plays. And if you think your opponent only 3-bets with the nuts, I don't want to see you calling because you got ace-king, ace-queen, or pocket tens. You need to think about the range your opponent is 3-betting with, not the strength of your hand. Sure, ace-queen and pocket tens is great against a player who 3-bets every single ace and every single pair, but not against the guy who 3-bets only kings or better. Ditch those hands versus those super nitty 3-betters. And make sure you also have a plan for post-flop play before you make the call. You know you're getting into a 3-bet pot as the caller, so how does your opponent play in 3-bet pots? Super aggressive, or maybe he's nitty and fit or fold? Having an idea of how to approach the post-flop play versus any opponent will make your call more positive EV. So we talked a little bit about folding versus 3-bet Resteals. talked about calling. Let's talk about 4-bet Resteals now. So we'll say you don't have a value hand like pocket queens or better, but maybe you've got a good ace blocking hand or a strong pocket pair or something else you think is good to 4-bet here. A good sizing for 4-bet Resteals is 20 to 25 big blinds. Let's say you open to 3 big blinds and he 3-bets you to 9 big blinds. And he's doing this maybe thinking that he can steal it from you pretty cheaply at just 9 big blinds. Now, your 4-bet, even though it is a Resteal, it really does look very strong to your opponent. Anytime anybody puts a 4, a 5, a 6-bet, even that initial 3-bet often looks strong to a lot of your opponents. And if you're making it to 20 to 25, maybe 25 or so big blinds, it's a huge chunk out of a full stack, out of a 100 big blind stack. The smaller the stacks, the more scary the bet is, but be careful that you check his stack size first, because if he's making it maybe 9 or 10 big blinds out of a 40 big blind stack, he's more likely to shove or call given the size of the pot in relation to his stack behind. And if he's got around 50 BBs in his stack, he can just do the good old stop and go play. He'll call your 4-bet, so the pot on the flop is around 40 big blinds. He put in 20 big blinds already, and maybe he has 30 big blinds behind. He'll just donk shove his 30 big blinds into the 40 big blind pot on any flop and expect folds from you unless you hit top pair or better. You want to know before you 4-bet that your opponent has a fold button and isn't committed when they made the 3-bet. Many tags and lags are this way, and I assume most of you are too. Making the 3-bet doesn't commit me to the pot pre-flop, and it shouldn't for you as well. Play the situation, and if your steal or 3-bet Resteal gets re-raised, consider the opponent before you call or 3-bet or 4-bet. Okay, so let's move on to consequence number 2. You'll be seeing flops with weaker holdings. Because you're stealing a whole lot more, you have a greater chance of seeing flops with weaker hands like, for example, 10-8 offsuit, Queen-6 suited, and 5-4 suited. Maybe not bad hands, but at the same time, they're on the weaker range of things. And with these weaker holdings, it's really not a bread and butter situation. But you can find ways to make the most out of these spots. I mentioned that you need a plan before you steal in case you get 3-bet. You also need a plan in case you get called and you're forced to see the flop. Let's say you stole with that Queen-6 suited and the big blind called you. What kind of hands can you flop and go for value? What kind of flops can you bluff at given what you think of the caller's range? You also want to consider how fit or fold or flop or turn honest your opponent is. If he's turn honest, you need to make sure you have enough chips to get there to bluff him off the hand on the turn. Once again, position is king here. Stealing from the cutoff or the button and getting called by a blind is great, but stealing from the small blind and getting called by the big blind makes things tougher on yourself. Take what you know about your opponent's post-flop tendencies and start to develop a plan before you hit that raise button pre-flop. You know you're going to see flops with weaker holdings, so make that plan, baby! We'll get to post-flop play a whole lot more when we cover MED, or minimum effective dose, number 6, which is C-bets. Alrighty, on to the third and final consequence of increased stealing, and that is developing a lag image. So you're getting more aggressive and you're opening a lot more. Due to this, your VPIP and PFR and raise first in stats are all going to take a hike. You could start to get to lag territory pretty quickly, and some of your opponents might pick up on this. That lifelong tag playstyle that you have, your 2016 stats. Well, those can now become 28-22 or 32-25 or even higher pretty darn quickly. Holy cow, 32-25, your image is now that of a lag. What do you do is the question. Granted, it might just be VPIP and PFR that jump up, and not your 3-bet stat. But some players might not notice this. You could be at 32-25 with a 5% 3-bet, and your opponents might only see the 32-25 numbers. And by seeing those, they'll assume that you 3-bet very wide. And this is great for you because your value 3-bets will get more action. But it could mean your bluffs will be less likely to work, so be aware of this. When you're considering making bluffs, when you develop that lag image, your opponent's fold to 3-bet stat is your friend. You want to use that to help you deal with opponents or find opponents who call 3-bets too frequently or who fold too often, and those are the guys you want to target. Another consequence of this is your open raises, your isolation raises, and even your post-flop check raises and donk bets will get less respect. Think about your own reaction to a lag's aggression. Less respect, right? A nit's, or a tag's, aggression often means strength, but a lag's could be anything. You can take advantage of this when you've got a value hand and you play it like a bluff. Maybe you can make smaller, weak-looking raises, or even oversized raises to look bluffy. Then sock it to their unbelieving faces when you re-raise or get called and turn over the nuts. This does mean that you'll get called and looked up more often, so you need to be more judicious in your bluff bets and raises. A good look at your opponent's stats and taking history into account really can help you here. Make sure you make any note of any really weak hands that you played aggressively and showed down. Maybe you triple barrel bluffed with a nut flush blocker. Make a note in the opponent's note taker, something like, quote unquote, saw me triple barrel bluff with a nut flush blocker and called me down with top pair weak kicker. Knowing your history with the opponent and what they're capable of will help you bluff them or get value from them in the future. And I'll get into more lag play and player types in MED number 5. But until then, just think about how you react to lags to give you a good idea how others will react to you. Also, now that you're a lag, or at least appear to be one because the VPIP and PFR have increased, you can do those things that you hate seeing lags do, and profit from your opponent's unwillingness to call aggression or to fight with greater aggression. Big news, everybody! We've got our first sponsor. Yep, it's habwin.com, baby. Habwin, HABWIN.com. Do you like online poker? What if you could win prizes at zero cost? With Habwin, you can play free, exclusive $100 free rolls on Party Poker and BWin. Check out our October Poker Fest. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. Central European Time, jump at the opportunity to win extra cash completely for free. Register now at www.habwin.com/OctoberPokerFest and start the fun. That's www.habwin.com/OctoberPokerFest. So, like I mentioned at the top of the show, my hand reading webinar is coming up tomorrow, Saturday, October 22nd at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The last webinar was great, even if I do say so myself. So, it's time to do another. The all-important skill of hand reading will be covered in full detail during this 1.5-hour webinar. It's the number one requested skill from all of you, so it's about time I hit it hard and gave you the help you're looking for. Accurate hand reading allows you to extract maximum value when you've got your opponent crushed. It helps you bluff your opponents off their showdown-worthy hands and helps you get away from those hopeless situations. And as a bonus, everyone who signs up gets a special hand reading podcast and a training video to boot. These 3 items, the webinar, podcast, and training video together, they combine to make you a rockstar hand reader. And if you can't attend the webinar, no worries, mate. You'll receive a copy of the webinar for you to watch during your next study session. Visit www.smartpokerstudy.com/hand-reading-webinar for more info and to purchase today. Seating is limited and time's running out, so don't miss out. Alrighty, back to class, poker people. So there is something very important that I haven't hit on yet. The table that you're sitting at determines how much you'll be stealing. Like I said in the Rejamming Like a Boss webinar last month, you want to be aware of the 3 people to your left when you're stealing. The more they'll let you steal, the better. There are some characteristics that you're looking for within the 3 people to your left that indicate whether or not you can steal a lot more frequently. Hopefully they have a high fold to steal percentage of 75% or more. And this is the most obvious, of course. The next stat that you want to look at is a low 3-bet versus steal, maybe less than 5%. This stat is good to look at because it tells you when they 3-bet versus a cutoff button or small blind open raise. The normal 3-bet stat collects data for 3-bets versus all open raises, so take a look at the 3-bet versus steal stat. You also want to see just in general a low 3-bet, maybe less than 5% as well. You want to look at this stat by position to gauge how often they fight back. Sometimes you'll encounter players who never 3-bet in the small blind, and other times you'll encounter players who 3-bet 15% from the small blind. There's a big difference between these 2 players when they do decide to 3-bet at you. The next stat you want to look for is a low flop C-bet percentage, maybe 35% or right around there. Even lower is better. And maybe a high fold to C-bet stat of about 65%. You want to steal against opponents who are fit or fold post-flop, and these 2 stats can tell you that. And the last thing you want to look for, or the last couple of things, is a low check raise, maybe less than 10%, and a low donk bet, which is less than 10% as well. These are bluff aggression stats. High numbers here are likely post-flop out-of-position bluffers, and your weaker and wider stealing ranges might not be able to counter these all too well. Ultimately, you're looking for players who play straightforward versus aggression and that rely on card strength. If you're facing a lot of resteals, or the button 3-bets or calls every steal, and you never see the flop in position, you may want to switch tables. Conversely, if you're at a table where the players to your right steal a lot, you might want to leave because why would you stay at a table that constantly puts pressure on your blinds just like you do on others? You put a ton of pressure on those to your left. You don't want to be at a table where the people to your right are putting pressure on you. If you start to defend versus these aggro players too much, you'll be playing too many pots out of position on the flop, and that ain't really that great of a situation to be in. So the idea of table selection is important at every level of the game, from the micro stakes to the high stakes. If you're at a table where you just don't know how to make money, or your opponents won't let you get away with your shenanigans, or they put too much pressure on you, then just leave it. Life's too short to say no to everything, and it's also too short to play at unprofitable tables. So all this talk of switching tables when the situation isn't good, it leads me to a greater point about choosing the best tables to play on. When you enter a hand, you're looking to have 3 advantages over your opponents. All 3 is great, 2 is good, and 1 or 0 is bad. And how often you have all 3, 2, or 1 or 0 of these advantages, this should be a factor in the tables you choose to play at. The 3 advantages are, number 1, card advantage, number 2, skill advantage, and number 3, positional advantage. So the first advantage to discuss is card advantage. Having stronger hands than your opponents, and even a stronger range than your opponents, is an incredible advantage at the tables. There's a few different ways you can have card advantage. One way is if your open raises are getting called by weak, fishy opponents with much worse hands, then you've set yourself up for a bread and butter situation. If your range is wide open, like when you're stealing, but your opponent caps his range by just calling your open, then you've got a range advantage. You've still got all the premium pocket pairs and ace-king, and your opponent who just called likely doesn't have any of those in his range. Another way you've got a card advantage is if you're 3-betting only a strong range and your opponent calls with much worse. That's an obvious card advantage there. To finish off this idea of card advantage here, when thinking about different card advantages that you can have, you don't want to be the person at the other end. You don't want to be playing with appreciably weaker ranges. You don't want to cap your range to mid-strength hands, and you don't want to be calling 3-bets with weak ranges. If the players are such that they often have a card advantage over you, then you need to change your ways or get to step in and find a better table. The second advantage was skill advantage. So having a skill advantage over your opponents is incredibly important. You've all heard the saying, if you can't point out the mark at the table, then you're it. Well, you don't want to be that mark. There's a few different ways you can see if you've got a skill advantage. If your opponents are playing a fishy and passive style that you know how to capitalize on, then you've got a skill advantage. If your laggy opponents are easily beaten and re-bluffed off of hands, then you've got a skill advantage. If you can spot glaring pre-flop or post-flop weaknesses that you can take advantage of, then you've got a skill advantage. If you can put together a plan for the entire hand pre-flop, and your opponents seem to be flailing street by street, then you've got a skill advantage. If you can honestly look at the table and see that you're the weak link here, that your skills aren't good enough to profit from the table, then it's time to leave. You don't have a skill advantage. Like I said, life's too short to play at unprofitable tables. And the final advantage is positional advantage. And this is the most obvious, We all know that playing in position makes your decisions easier, and it puts more pressure on your opponents. In real estate, it's location, location, location. In poker, it's position, position, position. Drill this into your head, put it on a post-it note, stick it on your forehead, look in a mirror every day. I'm just kidding about that. So, the button is the ultimate position at the table. You always have positional advantage if you play the button. But just because you open raise from the button, that doesn't mean you're profiting from that open. If you are easily blown off the button by 3-bets, then you're giving up your positional advantage as well as all your equity in the hand. The cutoff is a great position as well because you can often steal the button's position by open raising and getting them to fold. And make sure to never limp into a pot. Limping will almost never lead to having positional advantage unless you do some kind of limp raise. You've got to come into the pot for an open raise so that those yet to act have a good reason to fold, thereby giving up their positional advantage over you. And lastly, we know the blinds are the worst positions at the table. If you find yourself calling too much from the blinds, you're just giving your opponents this advantage over you. Tighten your blind calling range to avoid this, and throw in some more 3-bet resteals and bluffs versus the right players to take away their positional advantage and their equity. And you do this by just throwing out those bluffs and those raises and get them to fold their hands. So to sum up the 3 advantages, they are key to bread and butter situations. The more of these you have, the more likely you're going to make money at the table and in every single hand you play. If you find that you often lack one or more of these at your table, it's time to get up and find a more profitable table. Alrighty, we're about to end this and get to this week's challenge, but first, a little study talk. Last week, I gave you the filter for facing 3-bet resteals. In case you forgot, go to Actions and Opportunities and turn on the Attempted to Steal stat or filter under Preflop Raises. Next, under Preflop Opportunities, go to the Re-Raise Opportunities section and turn on the 4-bet facing a 3-bet opportunity. Hopefully, you use this filter already and you saved it as a quick filter for easy future reference. You did? Great! Now, what I recommend you do to study this week is to filter these hands and really think about the ranges that you got 3-bet by. If you saw any showdowns, use this info to help you gauge what hands your opponents 3-bet you with. You should create some saved ranges within Flopzilla for resteal ranges. Take these basic percentages and try to develop a range that fits the percentage. So I want you to create ranges for 3%, 6%, 10%, and a whopping 15% resteal. Once you create these ranges, see how your opening ranges fare versus these, and see how well your calling ranges and 4-bet ranges fare versus the different resteal ranges. Tweak your 3-bet calling and 4-betting ranges to give you pretty good equity. This range work will help you to understand your opponents more, and that's, of course, always a good thing. Challenge! Here's my challenge to you for this episode. I just told you how to filter for hands where you faced a resteal, and I gave you a great study technique of creating and analyzing resteal and calling or 4-betting ranges. So what you waiting for? This is your challenge this week. Get in there, filter for facing 3-bet resteals, then dissect your opponent's ranges and devise strong ranges with some bluffs built in to counter your opponent's 3-bet resteal aggression. Now it's your turn to take action and do something positive for your poker game.
Now get it on.
Alrighty, to recap this episode, I started with the 3 consequences you'll face when you increase your stealing. Number 1, facing more 3-bets. Number 2, seeing more flops with weaker ranges. And number 3, developing a lag image. I discussed how you can avoid some of the issues that come with stealing more, and how you can profit from them as well. I talked about calling resteals and 4-bet restealing yourself. Remember, position, considering your opponent's range, and having a plan before you steal are all key in dealing with the consequences of being an unrepentant blind stealer. You bastard! Blind stealing with no regard to whom you hurt in the process. I'm ashamed to call you a listener. Ha, just kidding, everybody. Steal, steal, and steal some more, I say. Get out there and profit from those nits, tags, and loose passive fish. If you're playing against me, go ahead and steal from me as much as possible. I'll try to fight back, or I'll ditch the table and leave you alone. I also talked about switching tables to avoid opponents who don't let you easily steal, or maybe they steal against you a heck of a lot. And I dove into a related poker topic, the 3 advantages, which were card advantage, skill advantage, and positional advantage. The more of these you have in every hand you play, the more profitable your time on the felt will be. If you're not already there, go to the show notes page at www.smartpokerstudy.com/pod102 for screenshots and links to everything mentioned today. Thank you so much for listening today. I want your feedback, so hit me with it through the show notes or send an email to sky@smartpokerstudy.com. And actually, a great listener named David, he gave the podcast a lovely podcast review and actually sent me an email about it. And what he said was, Smart Poker Study has helped me improve my game. After years of serious recreational play, this podcast has helped me improve. Well, you rock, David. Thank you very much for that awesome review. I appreciate it. I love it when people say nice things. So if you want to let me know how you feel about this podcast, please leave an iTunes review. And I've got a humongous shout out to Adam Wandler for his incredible Patreon support. This is one unbelievably fantastic poker person. He sent me an impassioned email about how his Jaguar broke down, 2 of his 3 maids quit on him, the refrigerator in his Maui vacation home finally gave out, and his personal chef of 5 years screwed up last night's filet mignon. But even with all of these first world hardships, Adam still found it within himself to support me at the $50 level on Patreon. And he did this because of the value that I provide him. Thank you very much, Adam, and I'll keep on keeping on thanks to you, buddy. And another shout out to Andreas for purchasing PokerTracker 4 through my affiliate link. He's intent on improving his game, so he made the purchase and I sent him my smart HUD as a thanks for the support. If you'd like the same, just head on over to www.smartpokerstudy.com/PokerTracker4 to download the software for a free trial. Once you decide to make the purchase, head back through that same link to make your purchase. Doing this will ensure that I get the affiliate credit for it. Once you send me your purchase confirmation, I'll send the Smart HUD over to you. It's 3 HUDs in 1. Cash games, 6 max MTTs and sit-and-goes, and full ring MTTs and sit-and-goes. Plus, it comes with 6 custom pop-ups with loads of additional stats. Once again, that's www.smartpokerstudy.com/PokerTracker4 to purchase PokerTracker 4. And thank you both, Adam and Andreas, for your support. Hey, those both start with the letter A. Team A for the win. Alrighty, poker peeps, be sure to come back next week for the first class in what will become an epic 3 or 4-parter on MED number 3, 3 bets. Don't miss out. And remember, tomorrow, Saturday, October 22nd, is the live hand reading webinar, so don't miss your chance. Go to www.smartpokerstudy.com/hand reading webinar to learn more and to sign up. And of course, I want to thank our show sponsor today, habwin.com. Check out their October Poker Fest by visiting www.habwin.com/October Poker Fest to register and start your free roll fun. Win some free cash and build that bankroll, baby. Word of mouth is the best advertising, so thank you very much for sharing this show with other poker people. Your sharing and caring helps us grow. Until next time, study smart, play much, and make your next session the best one yet.